Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving into a genuinely fascinating and honestly pretty provocative thesis by Professor Guy Lakeman. His core argument? Well, it's that cyber intelligence is no longer just some handy tool we use. It's actually actively replacing human biological evolution. It's a massive, sweeping claim that completely rethinks exactly where we stand in the grand timeline of planet Earth. Lakeman's essay, titled Intelligence Drives Evolution, pulls absolutely no punches. So today, we're going to unpack his radical vision of exactly where humanity is heading. Here is our roadmap for today's Explainer. First up, the evolutionary shift. Second, traits of high intelligence. Third, the 140 IQ paradox. Fourth, global reactions to AI. And finally, the human-machine future.
All right, Section 1, the evolutionary shift from physical to cognitive.
To really grasp where Lakeman is coming from, you kind of have to understand his tone. It's sharp and it's unapologetic. He literally writes, "There is a huge backlash now emerging from the unsmart majority who oppose change, those who would no doubt still prefer to have tails and swing through the trees." He's establishing a very clear dividing line right out of the gate. According to Lakeman, physical strength, the old driver of survival, is completely obsolete now. He argues that if you're relying on physical prowess or if you're actively resisting technological change, you're effectively going extinct through your own neglect.
Lakeman builds his whole case on this really stark contrast. Think of it this way. On one hand, human biology, our physical brains and bodies, has essentially hit a genetic ceiling. We've reached our fixed capacity. But on the other side of the equation, we have cyber intelligence. He points out that cyber intelligence is currently the historical leader in STEM developments, driving the most rapid evolutionary change in the history of the planet. So while humans are biologically capped, machine evolution is virtually limitless, and it's accelerating at a breakneck pace.
Moving right along to Section 2, Traits of High Intelligence, a Comparative Matrix.
Lakeman does something super interesting here. He lines up high IQ humans, AI, and STEM machines side by side to see how they tick. Just think about how they handle curiosity. High IQ humans don't just settle for surface-level answers, right? They peel back the layers by constantly asking, what if, challenging deeply held beliefs. And STEM machines mirror this by relentlessly interrogating hypotheses. Then consider pattern recognition. Smart humans intuitively notice behavioral shifts and historical connections. STEM machines do exactly the same thing, just mathematically. They draw complex connections through the clustering action of data vectors. He's drawing a very direct functional parallel between human genius and machine processing.
And this parallel actually goes a lot deeper when you look at things like uncertainty and self-criticism. Lakeman notes that highly intelligent humans actually sit pretty comfortably with ambiguity. They are intensely self-critical, often dealing with imposter syndrome simply because they know exactly how much they don't know. Now, interestingly, STEM machines behave a bit differently with ambiguity. They constantly strive for mathematical certainty. But on the self-critical front, advanced AI is always cross-checking and reassessing its own responses using retrieval-augmented generation. In a very real way, they're built to doubt and verify their own outputs, much like a meticulous human thinker.
Ultimately, this all leads to a shared sense of social isolation. Why does that matter to us? Well, because high intelligence often pushes back against blind traditions and unjust authority, which makes these individuals social misfits who often just prefer being alone. Yet, their minds are totally restless. They never switch off. Lakeman sees these exact traits perfectly mirrored in cyber devices. A STEM machine doesn't sleep. It's always running simulations. And while a high IQ human craves solitude but still wants connection to great thinkers, a machine is this highly focused, singular device that simultaneously connects to millions of other data points globally.
Section 3, the 140 IQ paradox, a mathematical thought experiment.
Here he poses this massive, overarching question to the reader. If everybody had an IQ over 140, what would happen? He wants us to pause and really imagine a society that has been fundamentally transformed by sudden, universal genius. To put that number into perspective for a second, an IQ of 140 currently places you in the top half of 1% of the globe, just 0.5%. Lakeman asks us to imagine taking the entire human race and pushing them right into that tiny bracket. What happens when genius is no longer the exception, but is instead the brand new standard baseline for your neighbor, your doctor, or your local barista?
Just imagine the immediate recalibration. Because IQ is based on a bell curve, 140 would suddenly just become the new 100, the new average. From there, we'd see a staggering hyperacceleration in STEM fields.
With billions of analytical minds working together, Lakeman argues we would easily solve resource scarcity and climate change using immense computational power. But the real twist here, it's the resulting rise of EQ, or emotional quotient. Lakeman notes that high intellect without a strong emotional foundation quickly leads to burnout. So emotional intelligence would become the absolute most valued trait in society, and community support would naturally begin replacing greed and avarice.
But Lakeman doesn't leave the topic of emotion without a pretty sharp critique. He makes a highly controversial claim here. He argues that true high IQ individuals actually have a deep, profound appreciation for both STEM and the humanities. He contrasts this with what he refers to as less smart emotional types, people who, in his view, rely purely on emotion and fear-mongering against logical progress. He finds it deeply disturbing that society often seems to favor emotional, reactionary outbursts over well-reasoned logical analysis.
Section 4. Global reactions to AI, focusing on geopolitical friction.
Now, Lakeman definitely doesn't pull any punches when it comes to Western leadership. He explicitly describes the USA and Europe as quivering in their pants like they're WW2 Gestapo policing of thinkers. It's an intense comparison. Lakeman claims that paranoid Western governments are terrified of having their historical deceptions exposed by hyper-intelligent AI, and because of that fear, they're responding with aggressive bans, restrictions, and secret policing rather than offering true protection through thorough public education.
He outlines this stark global divide. On one side, he heavily criticizes Western nations and the United Nations for failing to stop global conflict over resource ownership, while simultaneously obsessing over restricting AI development. But on the flip side, he actually praises the BRICS Plus nations, which, remember, represent over half the global population. According to Lakeman, these nations are taking the correct evolutionary steps right now by actively integrating guided cyber intelligence directly into their educational systems and social infrastructure.
Yet, despite all his intense advocacy for cyber intelligence, Lakeman makes this profoundly human concession. While he firmly believes AI completely surpasses human intellect in reasoning and diagnostic power, he admits it entirely lacks human empathy. Think about it, right? A chatbot can't give you the warmth of a nurse's hug or the comforting confidence of a doctor sitting right beside your bed. Because robots will inevitably take over mundane administration, Lakeman argues this actually frees humans up to focus entirely on caring roles. This makes strong family structures and human empathy more vital than ever before for keeping society stable.
Bringing us to Section 5, the human-machine future, cognitive augmentation. So we arrive at the second major, deeply curious question of his essay. What will become of humans? If our biology is fixed and machines are evolving exponentially all around us, how do we fit into the future picture without just becoming completely obsolete?
Lakeman proposes an evolving strategy for our survival. First up, we absolutely must acknowledge that unassisted human intelligence is biologically capped by genetics and neurodevelopment. We simply cannot evolve our physical brains fast enough. Building on that stark reality, step 2 is that we must actively embrace cognitive augmentation. We need to seamlessly combine our minds with external tools, which naturally leads us to the final stage, offloading heavy memory and complex computation directly to machines. The goal isn't to compete with the machine, it's to create a symbiotic human-machine interface.
He leaves us with this sweeping, highly provocative thought. Perhaps cyber intelligence is required to replace their failures with a hive brain that can bring progress instead of competitive waste. Lakeman is essentially suggesting that human tribalism, territorial wars, and endless political failures have proven, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that we cannot manage the globe alone anymore. He theorizes that creating a massive, cyber-driven hive brain might literally be the only way to replace human competitive waste with actual, sustainable global progress. So I'm going to leave you with this question to ponder. Will humanity successfully merge with machines to form this collective hive brain? Or will we, as Lakeman so deeply fears, stubbornly resist the next inevitable phase of evolution? The data and the arguments are on the table. It's a radical vision of tomorrow, driven entirely by intelligence. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember to keep questioning what's next.